If you're in your 60s, 70s, or even your 80s, and you're no longer having sex, I need to tell you something that might just surprise you. This isn't just about pleasure. This is about your heart, your brain, your very connection to life itself. And if no one else has ever had the courage to say this to you, then let me be the first. Giving up on intimacy might be silently stealing your health, your vitality, and even your sense of purpose. I'm Dr. James, and I've spent over 30 years helping men and women reclaim their well-being after 60. I've seen firsthand what happens when we stop treating sex as a luxury and start seeing it as a vital part of aging well. You might be thinking, it's too late for me, or maybe even, that part of my life is over. But let me tell you the truth. There are 4 specific consequences, real, physical, emotional consequences, that quietly begin when intimacy disappears. And sadly, most people never hear about them until it's too late. But here's the good news. It is never too late to reignite that part of you. In this video, I'll show you how. And in just a moment, we'll start with perhaps the most surprising risk of all. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to do that now and tap the bell icon so you don't miss out on future videos designed to help you live stronger, longer, and more connected. If this message speaks to you already, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me understand how to better support your journey. Your brain begins to age faster than it should. Let's begin with what may be the most overlooked consequence of losing intimacy after 60. It quietly begins to affect your brain, your memory, and the way you feel about life itself. I still remember a patient I saw years ago, George, a 72-year-old retired math teacher. He came into my office and said, "Doc, I just don't feel sharp anymore." Names were slipping his mind. He struggled to focus. He'd forget why he walked into a room. At first, nothing obvious showed up. No signs of dementia, no underlying illness. But after a few heart-to-heart conversations, George told me something that struck me deeply. Since his wife had passed away, he hadn't been sexually active. Not even once. For nearly 5 years. Now, most people dismiss this detail. They think, that's normal after a loss, or that's just aging. But here's what science tells us, and what I've seen again and again in my practice. When sexual intimacy disappears, the brain begins to lose one of its most powerful sources of stimulation. You see, sexual activity increases blood flow to the brain, especially in areas tied to memory, emotion, and learning. It's not just about the act. It's about what it awakens inside us. It releases dopamine, that feel-good chemical tied to motivation. It triggers oxytocin, the bonding hormone that reduces stress, and it floods the body with endorphins, which naturally elevate mood and even help protect the brain from aging. Without that stimulation, without that release, the brain can start to slow down. Focus fades, energy drops, and most concerning of all, the risk of cognitive decline, even early dementia, begins to creep in. Now, I'm not saying sex is some miracle cure, but when it's absent for months or even years, your brain misses out on a deeply human experience that fuels vitality. It's not about youth. It's not about performance. It's about connection. Intimacy of any kind, whether it's sexual expression, gentle touch, or emotional closeness, keeps the mind engaged and the emotional circuits alive. Without it, people often begin to withdraw. They become less curious, less social, less motivated to care for themselves. That slow fading? It isn't just emotional, it's neurological. And that's why I take this so seriously. Because once that decline sets in, it's hard to reverse, but here's the truth I want you to hold on to. With the right steps, the right mindset, and the courage to reconnect, you can keep your brain active, alert, and emotionally alive, well into your 80s and beyond. While the brain often shows the earliest signs of sexual disconnection, the body doesn't stay silent for long either. In fact, something starts happening deep inside your physical health. Something far more visible, and possibly more dangerous, that most people completely overlook. Let's talk about what happens to your circulation, your strength, and your hormones when sex quietly disappears from your life. Your body loses vital circulation and hormonal balance. I remember sitting across from a couple, Linda and Carl, both in their late 60s. They'd been married nearly 40 years, but over the last 5, their physical connection had faded, quietly, gently, like a candle slowly burning out. "We just assumed that part of life was over," Linda said softly, almost apologetically. Carl nodded beside her. But then he looked at me and confessed something honest. "I don't feel like myself anymore." His energy was low. He'd lost muscle. He'd gained weight. He said he felt older than his age, not just physically, but inside his skin, as if something essential was missing. When we looked deeper, one thing became clear. Their intimacy had gone completely silent. And sadly, that's something I see far too often. When sexual activity disappears, especially after 60, your body begins to lose its natural rhythm. That beautiful, internal rhythm that once kept your heart strong, your blood flowing, your hormones dancing in balance. It begins to break down. The cardiovascular boost that comes with arousal and touch begins to fade. Circulation slows. Blood vessels become less responsive. And oxygen delivery to key organs, including the heart and brain, diminishes. But most people never feel it all at once. They just slowly stop feeling like themselves. And here's something most people don't realize. Sex isn't just about pleasure, it's a form of exercise. Yes, real, body-enhancing, health-boosting exercise. It promotes blood flow. It increases lung capacity. It supports a stronger, more resilient heart. When it disappears, the body notices, quietly at first, then unmistakably. But perhaps even more critical is what happens hormonally. In both men and women, sexual activity plays a vital role in regulating hormones. For men, testosterone levels begin to plummet without regular stimulation. And when testosterone drops, it's not just about libido. It leads to fatigue, weight gain, irritability, and even depression. For women, estrogen and oxytocin levels fall. And when those levels drop, the risk of osteoporosis, joint pain, and mood swings rises. And with those changes, mobility, independence, and long-term health begin to erode, piece by piece. And the most dangerous part of all? It doesn't happen suddenly. You don't wake up one morning and feel dramatically different. You just start walking a little slower. You lose motivation to go to the gym. You sleep poorly. You gain a few pounds. And you start to believe, this is just aging. But here's what no one tells you. Much of it may be the direct result of physical disconnection. Now here's something even more important. You don't have to engage in intercourse to feel these benefits. Gentle touch, emotional closeness, holding hands, being seen, desired, appreciated. Even the smallest forms of intimacy can reactivate those hormonal pathways. Because intimacy isn't about performance, it's about presence. And the longer you go without it, the harder it becomes to bring your body back into balance. But as dangerous as those physical changes can be, they still don't touch the deepest loss of all. Because when intimacy fades, it's not just your body that feels it. It's your identity, your connection, your sense of worth. And for many older adults, that kind of silent pain runs deeper than they ever admit out loud. There's a kind of silence I see far too often in couples who've been together for decades. Not a loud silence, not angry, not bitter, but heavy. A quiet, aching distance that lives between two people who once knew every part of each other. A gap that grew, not from conflict, but from neglect, from grief, from fear, and from believing that this part of life is behind them. I once sat with a woman named Margaret. She was 74. Her husband had survived cancer, thankfully, but the treatments had taken a toll on him, and on them. They had stopped being intimate. Margaret looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "I don't want him to feel pressured, but I also miss being touched." Her voice trembled, her eyes welled up, and then she whispered, "I miss feeling like someone's partner, not just their caregiver." That quiet confession revealed something so many older couples carry inside. The ache of being physically present, but emotionally unseen. That quiet distance, emotional, physical, unspoken, can slowly unravel the fabric of even the strongest relationships. When intimacy fades, even for understandable reasons like illness or aging or exhaustion, we often stop reaching out. We stop initiating. We stop believing that we are still desirable. What's left is a strange kind of loneliness, not just being alone, but feeling unseen in the very presence of someone who once made your heart race. Over time, that loneliness becomes resentment, then shame, then silence. One partner assumes the other has lost interest. The other feels guilt, frustration, or even fear. But very few talk about it openly. And so, two good people begin to live like roommates, friendly, even loving, but no longer fully connected. And if you're single, this applies just as deeply. When we stop believing we're worthy of physical or emotional closeness, we begin to shrink. Not just in our desire, but in our identity. We lose that vital part of ourselves that craves to be wanted, to be held, to feel like we still matter as a whole person. That erosion of self-worth may never show up in a lab report, but it can take years off your life and joy from your days. What concerns me most is how invisible this damage is. You can be surrounded by family and still feel emotionally starved. You can be a loving spouse and still feel undesired, and over time that emptiness can lead to depression, anxiety, emotional withdrawal, and in some cases, even serious health decline. Because the human heart wasn't built to live without connection. But here's the most powerful truth I can share with you. It doesn't have to stay this way. Even the smallest steps toward affection, a touch, a compliment, a gentle openness, can begin to rebuild bridges long believed to be lost. I've watched couples in their 70s laugh again, flirt again, fall in love all over again. Not because their bodies were perfect, not because they were trying to relive their youth, but because they dared to reach for each other again. Still, for all the emotional weight this carries, the next consequence may be the most serious of all. Because when intimacy disappears, it's not just your brain, your body, or your heart that's at risk. It may actually be shortening the number of years you have left. Let me show you what the science says next. I once cared for a man named Robert. He was 81, proud, independent, still sharp as a tack. The kind of man who walked into a room with energy that seemed to defy his age. His blood pressure was stable. His heart was healthy. But what struck me most wasn't what I saw on his chart. It was the spark in his eyes. When I asked him what he thought kept him going so strong, he leaned in and smiled. "I still flirt with my wife every morning," he said. "We hold each other every night, and sometimes," he chuckled, "we still make love." It wasn't about the act itself. It was about the connection, the warmth, the shared closeness, the simple joy of still feeling human. And what Robert didn't fully realize was something that science now proves over and over again. Regular sexual intimacy in any form, even non-sexual affection, like hugging, cuddling, and tender touch, is associated with longer life. This isn't opinion. It's not fluff. It's data. One study from the British Medical Journal found that older adults who maintained a regular sex life had significantly lower mortality rates than those who didn't. Why? Because physical affection isn't just comforting. It's life-giving. It triggers powerful chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins, which help reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, boost your immune system, and calm your nervous system. These biological reactions aren't small. They affect your sleep, your mood, your ability to heal, and your overall resilience. But when that intimacy disappears, the shift happens quietly. Stress hormones like cortisol remain elevated. Sleep becomes lighter and less restorative. The immune system weakens. You become more vulnerable to illness, fatigue, anxiety, and emotional withdrawal. You may feel more isolated, less motivated to socialize, to move, or even to eat well. These are not just emotional consequences. They are measurable biological shifts that can determine how long and how well you live. Too many people accept this decline as just getting old. But in truth, it often begins with disconnection. The human body was designed to thrive on closeness. When it's deprived of that, whether by circumstance, habit, grief, or the belief that it's too late, it begins to break down, one system at a time. You may not feel it overnight, but years of emotional and physical silence can lead to chronic illness, premature aging, and in some cases, a shorter life. That may sound harsh, but I've seen it unfold in far too many lives to ignore. Still, I've seen something else too, something just as powerful. I've seen people in their 70s and 80s regain connection and literally transform, not just how they feel, but how they live. The energy comes back, their sleep improves, their smiles return. They look genuinely younger. Not because of medicine, not because of luck, but because they reopened the door to connection, affection, and even love. And that brings me to the most important message of all. The one that too many people never hear. No matter how long it's been, no matter how far away intimacy feels right now, you can bring it back. Let me show you how to begin, because it's never too late to start again. I'll never forget a woman named Eleanor. She was 78 when she came to see me, sharp-minded, beautifully composed, the kind of presence that radiated quiet strength. But when she sat down, her voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I miss feeling like a woman. Not someone's grandmother, not someone's patient, just a woman." It had been nearly a decade since she had felt any kind of physical affection, and over time she told herself that part of her life was simply over. That intimacy was for the young. That desire, touch, closeness were no longer hers to have. But what Eleanor didn't yet know, and what I see every single day, is this: the human spirit has an incredible ability to reawaken. No matter how long it's been. Whether you're 60 or 90, whether it's been months or years, here's the truth. As long as you are alive, intimacy is still possible. Desire may change. Your body may not respond the way it once did, but connection, real, nourishing, meaningful connection, does not expire. And it doesn't have to begin with grand gestures or perfect romance. Sometimes it starts with something small. A single moment, a conversation, a shared laugh, a hand held, a single sentence whispered in courage, "I miss you." For couples who've drifted, that first step back can feel awkward, maybe even a little scary. But I've watched it happen time and time again. One brave step, one honest moment, and suddenly, something shifts. They look at each other differently. They feel lighter, more alive, more seen than they've felt in years. not because their bodies were the same, but because they dared to reach out again. And if you're single, or widowed, or simply alone right now, please don't think this message isn't for you. Reconnection doesn't only happen between two people. It can begin with yourself. Your body is still worthy of care. Your heart still has room for joy, for touch, for companionship. Whether it's through therapeutic touch, deep friendships, or even the courage to open yourself to love again. The path is still open. The question isn't, can I get it back? The question is, am I willing to try? Because when you do, when you take that first step, without pressure, without shame, without expectations, something beautiful starts to happen. Energy returns. Confidence begins to bloom. You stop feeling invisible. You start feeling like yourself again. I've worked with countless people who thought their time had passed. Some were recovering from illness. Some were carrying years of guilt or grief. Some were simply scared to try again. But the ones who gave themselves permission to try, to take one step, however small, something inside them lit up. And I mean that literally. Their blood pressure improved, their posture straightened, their laughter returned. So hear me now. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. Your story is not over. In fact, your next chapter, it might just be the most fulfilling one yet, if you knew that one small step could bring back your vitality, your joy, and your deep human connection. What would stop you from taking it? And that brings us to the final, most powerful truth of all. The truth you deserve to hear. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you. Not just for watching or listening, but for being open. Because this conversation, it's not always easy. Talking about sex, connection, or aging can bring up discomfort, regret, even grief. But if there's one truth I've learned in my decades of working with older adults, it's this: the desire to feel alive, the desire to feel close, the desire to feel seen. It never leaves us. It just gets buried. Under layers of time, of loss, of silence, of, I guess that part of life is over. We've talked about how your brain starts to age faster when intimacy fades. Your circulation and hormones quietly begin to weaken. Your relationships and even your self-worth begin to suffer in silence. And how, believe it or not, your very life expectancy can be affected. These are not small inconveniences. They are real, measurable, and life-altering changes. And yet, there's something deeply hopeful woven through all of them. They're not final. I've watched couples reconnect after decades of distance. I've seen widows and widowers rediscover love in their 70s and 80s. I've helped men reclaim confidence they thought they had lost forever. I've watched women realize they are still beautiful, still desirable, still deeply worthy of touch and tenderness. And you know what all these people had in common? They gave themselves permission to begin again. This isn't about turning back time. It's about reclaiming what still belongs to you. Intimacy, joy, human connection. These are not reserved for the young. In fact, I believe they matter more than ever as we age, because they nourish not just the body, but the soul. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're in a loving marriage, a strained one, whether you're single, grieving, or starting over, I hope this message reminded you that your story isn't over. There is still time. Time for laughter, time for healing, time for closeness, time for the spark to return. And if something inside you is whispering, maybe I could try, I hope you listen to it. You don't need to fix everything overnight. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take one step. Maybe that step is a conversation. Maybe it's a gentle touch. Maybe it's allowing yourself to hope again, without shame, because you are not done, not even close. And if no one's told you this lately, let me say it clearly. You deserve to feel alive. You deserve to feel desired. You deserve to feel connected. Not someday. Not in memory. Now.